And I think that's the biggest thing, for one, that GenZers can do. And I think they're doing it because I see this push with the millennials that have come through the behavioral healthcare system and looking at Gen Z and advocating for behavioral health and speaking it out and saying, we're not going to hide this anymore. If I have depression, I'm going to let people know. So other people with depression know it's okay.
Record on this computer. Okay, we're recording. Cool. Ready?
Yep.
Good?
Yes, sir.
All right, what's up, guys? RLTKPHX podcast, Real Talk Phoenix, episode 29.
29.
Quarantine files. We're still here, but we're almost at lights at the end of the tunnel, right? We're almost there. But it's been super cool. We've been zooming in the guests, and we have another special guest with us today, someone who's near and dear to our heart, a good friend of ours who's doing some really cool work that you're going to learn about. And I'm really excited because I think there's some really cool things he has to share with us.
The guy who got us started thinking about high school campuses.
Yeah, seriously. We've been going back. We go back a minute. None other than my friend Carl Morris. So Carl, what's up, bud?
Hey, how's it going? Excited to be here and just to have this conversation with you guys, and a conversation that we've been having for a long time, and now we're just going to put it on a podcast.
Yeah, man, I'm excited. Yeah. Repping the Real Talk shirt, got the beard on fleek.
The old school Real Talk
You know what I'm saying?
Logo.
Yeah, the retro logo.
Old school over here. Got to get it.
Let them know.
We might have to put those out eventually, bro. Like as a like retro vintage shirt, limited edition. Yeah, exactly. Bro, vintage. So yeah, man, episode 29. Super grateful to have you here with us. And so let's just dive in. So who are you? What's your story? Where are you from? How'd you grow up, man?
Yeah, my name's Kyle Morris, and I grew up in Arizona, born and raised, and spent a little time really close to your old neck of the woods in near Longview, Texas, near Tyler, Texas, in that area. We were actually all there at the same time, just didn't know each other.
It's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, and so grew up in Arizona. I went to Westwood High School in Mesa, so Mesa public school system, where some of the Real Talk's been in the East Valley. So that's been a lot of cool things to see out there. But yeah, just grew up in Mesa. Grew up in church. My parents are both Christians and really good influences. And that doesn't mean my high school years were any better. I definitely struggled in high school, and that's kind of where my story starts. Is in high school and just not following Jesus Christ and as my Lord and Savior during that time, just getting into whatever I wanted to do, partying, drugs, alcohol, being in negative relationships, friendships that really hurt me, hurt my family. And really from that experience, I was pulled out of that from a youth pastor that just saw the need to reach out to me. It was a really weird situation, and the fact that he asked me to go on a missions trip. I was still going to church during this time. I was just kind of the rebellious one, the one that didn't pay attention and didn't do what I needed to be doing, and just always tried to get in trouble in some way. But he saw, I guess, maybe potential in me and what that looked like, and maybe some leadership skills in me that I didn't see. And so he said, "Hey, come on this mission trip." And so I was like, "All right, I was like, where are we going?" He's like, "Jamaica." And I'm like, "Cool, I'll go."
I'm there.
Small world, man.
Yeah. Hey, I was like, I will go.
Now you're
Jamaica.
Speaking to a Jamaican.
Yeah. So I was like, I'm going to go and just for fun, I guess. I've never been out of the country at that point in my life at 18. And so why not? So something that I didn't know going into the trip was that the elders, really spoke to him and said, "Hey, we don't want you to take him."
Wow.
And so he said, "You know what? Here's my resignation and I'm going to go on this trip, and I'm going to take him. And when I get back, I'm done."
Wow. Dang.
And and I didn't know any of this at the time. It was like years after that I learned some of this stuff. And really he decided that, my walk with Christ was more important than anything else. And for him to speak into me and to take me on this trip to teach me was extremely important. So that's what happened. I went on this trip, and this youth pastor just said, "I'm going to do what it takes." And he stuck with me. He had me right by his side the whole trip. And it was just opportunity after opportunity. And really that's kind of where I got started in my work with high school students. Was my life as a high school student was a wreck. And I didn't know how to do anything. and I just kind of got in trouble all the time. And so from that moment of that trip, it really took me in a place of thinking about more than myself. I never thought about anybody else, I think, at that moment until after that trip and being in a third world country, seeing poverty, but then also seeing some of the joy and happiness people had even within that poverty. It just kind of shook my worldview of what's going on, and kind of introduced me to who God really is, and started to reveal his character to me. And so I didn't really know Jesus that well at the time, besides the basic facts of he died for me on the cross for my sins, and that and he rose again. But that was kind of it. That was where it started. And from that moment, I just grew in knowing that my life was to serve people, and mostly students. So from 18, I had a scholarship through Toyota to work at Lexus, and I was working I had an internship at Lexus after high school, and I had this opportunity to have a really cool job. I mean, I was 18 years old working on Lexus vehicles and in an air conditioned shop,
crazy.
especially in Arizona.
That's crazy, bro.
Yeah, you were fortunate.
I started that program, and they were paying for my school. They were paying me to work there, all tools paid for, all kinds of stuff. And through that summer, after I got back from that trip and started this job, it was just nagging at me like, hey, this is not what you're supposed to be doing. And I never had that feeling before. And I just kept thinking I need to do something different, which sounded crazy at the time. And definitely my parents were not on board, being 18 and then all of a sudden saying, hey, I'm going to quit this cool opportunity I just got, and I'm going to go to college, which I never planned on doing. And I'm just going to help out at the church. And so, and that's what I did. And my dad, even though being a Christian and supportive, that wasn't the reputation I had at that time to follow what God wanted me to do. So I was kind of like, I just kind of went in that direction. And even though he wasn't super happy about it, I quit everything and started interning at a church. And at the church I grew up at that time, we got a new youth pastor because the old youth pastor had resigned. We got a new one, and I started interning under him. And so kind of just through that crazy experience and God just kind of turning everything around from my life to my future to all of those things is really where it started, working with students. And I wanted to work with students because I had such a hard time, and I wanted there to be an opportunity for hopefully to get youth out of those situations earlier and not have such a negative impact in high school, but have a positive impact in high school. And so when it comes to Real Talk and getting involved in you guys, that was kind of, when you guys came here to Arizona, and I was like, hey, are you guys going to get in the high schools? Because I think there's a lot of opportunity. That's where my heart started from, is in high school and helping those students. So that's kind of where my passion comes from, is through my experience in high school and just kind of how my life changed from 18 to 19 real fast. That doesn't mean 18 through college was easy or I didn't have struggles.
Sure.
I still did. There's still the same temptations as there were before, but now it was finding good friends, I think, was my next step, in finding people who would really who really care for me and want me to do good in life. And so I had to change that up a lot, and made good friends. Made a friend, you guys know Dakota Smith, a best friend of mine.
Shout out to Dakota.
Shout out to Dakota. He really stepped into my life when I was probably 19 years old, and we were working at the church together. And that was the friendship that really got me into Bible college and to just kind of leading that path of how can I serve youth. So to this day, I went to Arizona Christian University, graduated. But while I was there, I didn't want to get a degree in ministry. And maybe that was just my kind of real world sense, kind of like, hey, I want to have extra tools in my tool belt. So I got a degree in behavioral health from Arizona Christian University. And because I felt like I was already at a church, I was learning stuff, and I didn't want a Christian ministry degree. I wanted something else. So I did that for the fact that I would just have different tools in my tool belt than most youth pastors. And so that's why I made that choice. And I'm glad I did, because it's led to really a life and a career of doing two things, ministry and serving in the area of behavioral health. And that's been super cool. I was able to meet my wife through working in the behavioral health care system, and she's a therapist, and just kind of how my life has grown from there, and how God's used me in not necessarily a Christian setting, because the behavioral health places I've worked have not been Christian settings. They've been just behavioral health clinics and different things to work in. And so I've kind of been kept myself in both worlds in a sense, and ministering to all people, and also being in the church setting as I'm a youth pastor now as well, part-time. And so kind of playing both roles, still all youth, and all the work that I've done in behavioral health has been really cool, because I've always thought about how can I work with youth in the world, not in a church setting. How does that work, and what does that look like? And I've been able to serve youth ages 15 to 25 in the behavioral health care system. We call that transition age youth. That population, and I've been able to work with those youth specifically the entire time I've been in the behavioral health care system. From independent living programs at a behavioral health clinic to now I work more on the insurance side and project management, and really helping the whole behavioral health system here in Maricopa County, specifically in lots of other parts of Arizona. How can we improve the lives of these youth who have mental illness, who are struggling with many different things, from depression, suicide, bipolar disorder, substance use issues, all kinds of different things. And so I've kind of dove into just youth in general, and even taking it to the step further to really looking at behavioral health, and that's really helped me in ministry as well. I've had tons of opportunities to educate parents around behavioral health and how to navigate some of those tough waters in life. And so my story has kind of led me to this point where now I'm, kind of in a dual role, working in the healthcare system, hopefully helping to improve the lives of youth, but also still doing ministry and still at a church and still teaching God's word. And I think just continually following what God wants me to do has put me in those places to do that.
That's dope, bro. I think of a couple of things that you said. I think first, I think what was super impactful about your story is the reality that you had a youth pastor who was willing to give up his job for you.
Wow.
And I think about the profoundness of that in terms of, influences of Gen Z, right? This dude was willing to give up his livelihood to stand up for you and say, like, yo, what's happening here is not right, and I'm going to do something about it. And I believe in this so much, I'm willing to give up my job. You know what I'm saying? And then he took you on this trip, and this trip changed your life. And as a consequence of the hard decision that he made, in the moment, not seeing what would happen as a consequence, your life looks completely different from how it possibly could have looked if he hadn't made that decision. That's pretty stinking profound, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's really kind of part of the core of who I am when it comes to working with youth is if I see a youth being wronged, if I see a youth in a situation where people aren't helping them, if they're the outcast, if they're, going through stuff that they're afraid to share, those are the youth that I want to reach, because I was in a place where, at the time, I was kind of being rejected in a sense, and someone stood up for me and said, no, this youth needs me and needs to understand that someone has their back and wants to teach them, the great things, especially about the Bible and about God, but also just life, that I have a support system and I'm connected to somebody. And even though I have a great family and they're all supportive, I think as a young adult, families, even though if they're there and they're supportive and that they're there, you can still struggle with finding your connection outside of family. And I think that's where I was at that time. But he was able to connect with me on a level and build trust. And I learned so much from him, even in that, I don't know, 14 days I was in Jamaica, and just how impactful that was. I mean, I can just recollect just memories from my mind. I can see it vividly of that entire experience, of all the people I talked to. And there's just not too many memories that are that vivid, but that trip is so vivid in my mind, and how I go back to it all the time and go, I have to continue to remember that somebody loved me so much that they were willing to sacrifice, some of the things of this world to say, no, this guy needs to be with me here, and I need to share with him the love of Jesus Christ. And that's what he did. And I can't thank him enough. And I don't really talk to him much since. I know he still lives in Arizona, and every now and again I see him, but I just think, to me, his legacy is that he was willing to do whatever it took for a youth to change their life. And, I want to continue to do that for youth as much as possible as well.
And that's a great story.
It's good, bro. Like, dang.
We got to tag him in this piece. He's going to be crying.
Bro, that's so good.
That's amazing, man.
So, you kind of obviously led us into what you do. So you're in the behavioral health field, which I think, even as I think about what we're going through right now as a society, is a very relevant piece to everything that's happening and everything that's going to be happening over the next 12 to 18 months, probably 2 years, right? Because it's going to take time for people to readjust, to adjust to whatever our new normal is. And all the youth that have, missed graduations and all those different types of things. And, I haven't even thought about kids that are in the behavioral health system, the reality that they've probably been cooped up in those houses, you know what I'm saying? And all those different types of things. So we're like dummies, right? We don't understand the way you walk. Like, what is it that we need to understand about?
I understand it a little
Okay, that's true. You were a level 1 investigator, right? So you understand things that I don't. I'm a dummy, okay? Let me speak for me. So help me understand, what is it and what's really important for me to know about the behavioral health system as somebody who cares about teenagers and for our audience as well as people who care about young people, right? Gen Zers. What do we need to know?
I think one of the things that people need to know is really there's kind of two different behavioral health systems. In Arizona, we have access or state insurance. And what I work in is kind of within those youth who are maybe in the Department of Child Safety's care. I work with those youth in behavioral health services. Also those who are involved, who are the Department of Developmental Disabilities, so those with autism and seizure disorders and cognitive disabilities, intellectual disabilities.
So like
and
at-risk
then,
youth,
and
basically.
Yeah, and then any at-risk youth who maybe are struggling with substances, drugs, whatever that may be. So really any youth, and a lot of the work that I do are, youth who are lower income. And then there's the other side of it. There is the ones who don't meet that threshold and need behavioral health services, who aren't lower income and have to pay for it themselves.
Wow.
And that is a drastic difference between the two.
What's the difference? What do you see?
Well, the main difference is there is an actual system that exists for the lower income. There's clinics that exist with case managers and therapists and behavior coaches and independent living programs and all kinds of services available for these youth of lower income. Those who are not, you really limit the services available to them. They really only have, a psychologist or psychiatrist to go see, a psychiatrist to go get medication, and maybe a therapist if they can afford it. So kind of when you're over the threshold of that income and you aren't on that state insurance and don't have that availability to get those services, those youth are at a deficit. And I think we've seen through Real Talk in the East Valley in the Metro Phoenix area, we've seen, high suicide rates in a lot of those
never
schools
thought about it like
out
that.
in Gilbert.
That's
You're
crazy.
blowing my mind right now.
Those
I
youth
wish you would
out
have
there,
told me this like a long time ago. That's a really great point.
Yeah, and those youth out there may not be getting the services they need because, one, their insurance doesn't provide it. They're not contracted to provide
But
the
it's
services.
assumed that they're getting it because they're from affluent areas.
Yeah, but I don't, unless their parents are paying for it or the school's paying for it, or, it could be getting missed. And a lot of kids just aren't talking about it. And I think that's the biggest thing, for one, that Gen Zers can do. And I think they're doing it because I see this push with the millennials that have come through the behavioral healthcare system and looking at Gen Z and advocating for behavioral health and speaking it out and saying, we're not going to hide this anymore. If I have depression, I'm going to let people know. So other people with depression know it's okay. I'm here.
So that's what you think. So that's what you think the reason for this is. I've often thought that too. Like, what makes Gen Z any different from teenagers before them? The difference is that Gen Z has a generation of people advocating for mental health for them. Like, when I think about the people in my life, when I may have had mental health issues, basically it was like, pick yourself up by your bootstraps, get your stuff together and get down the road. Like, I don't think anyone took any mental health care needs unless it was like some kind of
unless it was like visible, right,
or some like extreme situation, like basically telling kids, unless you're extreme, your issues just need to be shoved down and mitigated and not ever dealt with.
That's good, bro.
So you got a whole generation of people who were taught never to take their mental health care issues seriously.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and I think we also have just some misrepresented stuff around behavioral health. A lot of times people like to talk about, when talking about depression, they like to link suicide to depression, and that's just not always the case. There can be a youth who's not depressed who still struggles with suicidal thoughts, and I don't think those are always linked, and we like to link it.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Like how is that? I think.
Yeah, I definitely think there's more economic pressures. We're going to
Mm.
see that in Gen Z around that are pushing suicide rates. So if you look at a lot of the data around the United States, the hot
Wow.
pockets of economic issues, you're going to see high suicide rates. And I don't think
And
it's
kids
always
that were
around.
never depressed before.
Yeah, and I think that's even more
Man.
alarming because we look at youth who are not depressed. They've never really talked about this depression, but all of a sudden they're having these thoughts, and there's so much stress involved. I think about the East Valley and just the diversity. There are a lot of affluent neighborhoods, but
Mm.
maybe you're not affluent, but you're at a school that
Mm,
is, and you're kind of the
yeah.
outcast now. You don't have the
Yeah.
money. You
Or
can't
your
really do
parents
the
lose their
things,
job, right? Yeah, bro.
And
something
now
like
it's
that. And
revealed that
right.
you're not rich
Man,
like you were pretending to
that's a
be.
good point, bro. And I've always wondered that because like when we go to schools where lower socioeconomic, like those kids aren't, they're not
They're
like
not rich.
taking their lives. They're
Yeah.
not, they're not
Oh,
struggling with the
yeah.
same
I get what you're
things. You know what
saying.
I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like we're not seeing the same kinds of rates in some areas more than others. And
Right.
that's a profound point, bro. If you live in a richer part of town, but perhaps your parents really don't have the capabilities to get you the
Mm-hmm.
mental health care you need, or you feel in this social pressure not to talk about it, or your parents just
This is the first time you've ever had any real
exactly
pressure.
right. Like, dang, that's a profound point, bro.
Man. And if, like you said, they had underlying mental health issues and it wasn't being dealt with, which I thought earlier was a really profound point, like this COVID-19 situation, like it's just a tinderbox to reveal all that stuff,
Mm-hmm.
especially as their parents aren't able to recover economically. They have to move to Cesar Chavez High School, like who knows what happens. Man, I
Yeah,
never thought about that. Yeah.
yeah, and there's also a lot of people don't think about when mental illness, when some of that starts. It doesn't always show itself before 18 years old. A lot of times it's
Mm,
after. So
Wow.
maybe in high school things were good, and things were fine. Nothing, you didn't have depression or anxiety or whatever that may be. And then all of a sudden, after 18, you get into college, which we know can be a struggle going, just learning how to be an adult. And then all of a sudden, you have an episode of some sort connected to your mental health, and you don't know what it is. You don't know how to
Wow.
handle it. You don't know who to ask for help. You're 18, 19, 20 years old, and you've all of a sudden had this problem that you have no idea where to go. So I think there's just a lot more to be talked about in our
mm,
society around mental health, and I hope that it
Man.
just becomes a norm, and that kids really speak up. And I think Gen Z can take what the millennials have done around mental health, because I think it's become a bigger issue in our nation and our culture to talk about mental health. Usually it comes up around shootings in schools politically,
Right.
which they use that platform for a lot of things, and I don't think school shooting should be the platform for mental health. Obviously they just
Yeah.
use it to do that, but I think we're seeing more and more of it being talked about, because I don't think when you connect it to a school shooting, you're connecting it to negative, this stigma around it, that you're going to shoot up a school if you have mental
Mm.
illness, which is not
Mm-hmm.
true at all.
mm-hmm.
Mm.
There's tons
Wow.
of youth who are struggling with mental illness every day going to school, and they're just fine, and they're having
So you think they're
just
afraid
go through
to
these
admit
struggles.
that because they don't want to be labeled as a potential shooter or something like that?
Yeah, I look on the news every time there's a school shooting. Oh, he had mental health issues, and then you think
Mm.
a 17-year-old is going to go, "Oh yeah, I have mental health issues too." Like no one's going to
Dang,
do
that's a good
that.
point, bro.
No one's going
That's a
to say
good
that.
point, bro.
So if we keep
Dang.
connecting
Well,
negative events to mental health issues, we're going to keep the negative stigma. And this is not just happening in our
mm,
society. This is happening in healthcare as well. Not all doctors are the best supports
mm.
for those with mental health. You go to your primary care physician and tell them you have a mental health issue. I just don't think they're not always trained to have those conversations. They may be trained in physical health, but they're not always trained in mental health. So that's why you see
What
a
a
big
great
push
point.
for integrated care. We want to have clinics that have everybody and who are fully trained in all areas and how to have those conversations.
Can
Because
you
I get
talk about that a
more and
little
more
bit more?
youth.
Yeah, what do you mean by
Yeah,
integrative
Everyone doesn't
care?
understand what you mean when you say integrated care. Just
so
Yeah.
elaborate
integrated
on
care
that.
is more of a holistic approach. So think about a doctor's office with your primary care physician, also with your psychiatrist, with your therapist, with your case manager. Everyone's in the same office, so you're not going to
Mm.
multiple different offices to receive all your health care. It's kind of a one-stop shop,
Wow.
and that's really where healthcare is going right now. Even within
Man.
the access plans and things like that. So for the lower income. We're looking at integrated care. So hopefully someday when you go to your doctor's office, you know, they're asking you those questions. Hey, are you having any thoughts of suicide, hurting yourself or others? You know, kind of doing the screenings to make sure that, hey, are these things happening? Are you depressed? Do you have any anxiety? You know, and having your primary care doctor ask those questions. Because I don't remember growing up, my primary care doctor, when I'd go in for a strep throat, were they like, hey, are you thinking about these things? You know, that wasn't a question that I got. So I just think it's cool that we're moving in that direction, and I think that'll help with the stigma within healthcare. But also, we do need to look at, you know, influencing the next generation to stand up for those who have mental health issues, and
so good, man.
Take it to the next level and say, we want you to talk about it. We want to hear from you. And there are tons of advocates and tons of public speakers out there who are sharing their stories, who are trying to get it out there to say, you are not alone. And that's really what all we're trying to do in the behavioral health industry, is saying, you are not alone. There's help for you. Please talk about it.
Yeah. I noticed that recently. I was watching television and there was a commercial, and it was kind of a cool commercial. Yeah. The Seize the Awkward. And I was like, wow, these guys are really taking this issue seriously if they're putting a commercial and all that on television.
Man,
yeah, I think we're going to see it more and more, which is good. And you know, there's definitely a need to talk about these things. I mean, it's like any other illness that was out there, bring up a huge one, AIDS, right? Go back into the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, like, you didn't talk about that. That wasn't an open conversation about AIDS. Today, now it is. Let's talk about AIDS. Let's talk about how to prevent it. Let's talk about, we're just talking about, we want to make sure we're doing what we're supposed to do. We need to do the same thing with mental health. Let's talk about it. Let's put it out there. It's okay. We all struggle at times. We all have our different barriers in life.
Do you think someday that people will look at mental health kind of the same way they look at, a gym membership? Like, man, I need to do this thing because I need to stay as fit as possible. Like, it'll be destigmatized from like this thing that like people at the beginning of the year, they sign up to get, a therapist or something like that, kind of the gym membership. Do you ever see that being a potential, something like that?
Yeah, certainly. I think one of the things that comes to mind is when we look at our entertainment industry. I look at the 90s TV shows, and when there's comedies, they're like, I'm going to go see a shrink. I'm going to go see they kind of make fun of it in the sense of those conversations are kind of a joke, or there's something wrong with you. When I think we're hopefully heading in a direction where that's not the case. Going and seeing a therapist, a counselor is not a bad thing. It's not even a bad thing for those who don't have a mental health issue and just need to talk about something that's going on in their lives and just need help. And so we should definitely not put stigma around therapists or around counseling. It is a good practice. Healthy people should even at times have those conversations and maybe go work some things out. So I don't think that should be stigmatized at all. And hopefully they will become a really cool thing to where people are open about it. And it's not pushed to the side and seen as a weakness, because I see a lot of strengths in those who have mental health issues, a lot of overcoming adversity, and some of the most hardest working people, even though they may have limitations, they're going to find ways around those limitations. And
Man, so
we need to be supporting them.
That's good, bro. So how can you talk about support for people who perhaps are have a young person in their life that may have some behavioral health issues or maybe wrestling with some things? What would be your advice in terms of how they should approach that person and engage them with that issue?
For one, the first thing I would say is just listen. A lot of times these youth are not listened to. They're talked to. They're told what to do. At a young age, if they've been in the behavioral health system, they've been told, you go to therapy, you take these meds, you do all of these things. And they've kind of been forced into it instead of agreeing to it. So when you really get into the young adults, the high school kids, you're as a human, you're getting into that stage of making decisions for yourself and becoming an adult. And really, it's about listening. If you're trying to support someone with a mental health issue, listen to them. They are the expert in what they're struggling with. And if you just take the time to listen to their needs, they're easy to see. A lot of times it's just hanging out and listening. And then when they're in crisis, they're going to call the person that listens to them. They're not going to call
Wow.
the person that is telling them what to do, or maybe, you know, a case manager that's just kind of railroading them into services, or a team that's saying, we're going to make you do all these, you know, therapeutic groups and all kinds of stuff. I think it's listening to them and saying, what do you need? And I think you'll really open a door to recovery that at times is just, we just miss it. And it's just listening.
Man, that's good, bro. Have you found that a lot of, because I feel like this may be true, that a lot of times people know what's wrong with them, or they have a clear sense of what's wrong with them. And like you said, you get people telling you everything that's wrong with you instead of listening to you. If you found that, like, when that approach is really taken, perhaps there's like a better chance of, I don't want to say recovery, but like coping with whatever it is you're dealing with when there are certain things in place for that young person. Do you get what I'm trying to get at?
Yeah, I think when you're listening to somebody, you're not just listening to their weaknesses. You're not just hearing the bad stuff that's going on, but you start to hear some strengths in them. A lot of, you know, I don't know if you guys ever heard of motivational interviewing, but really it's just a way to question somebody, to get them to talk about ways that they can overcome a situation that they're in, and really have them come up with the solution. But what you're doing is you're listening to those simple things, you're validating their feelings, you're, you know, and then you're pointing out kind of some of those strengths that they have that they may not have seen themselves, because no one's listening to them and they just see the negative stuff. And I think that is the hardest part for me, is because somebody when I was young saw something in me when I was messing up and said, hey, I'm going to take you under my wing. I'm going to take you on this trip, and I'm going to teach you. And I think it's the same way with these youth. I want to listen to you. I see the potential in you. I see you struggling, and I want to help you. Because when I was 18, I didn't have a mental health issue, and I struggled tremendously. So think about that. Add something on top of that, an extra barrier, whatever's been going on in their lives. They have a lot going on, and I had a hard time handling it without those barriers. And these youth have way more barriers in their lives than I do, with struggling with whatever mental health issue that may be. So I think it's listening, finding their strengths, pointing them out, believing in them, and helping them push forward, giving them a voice that they've never had before, and telling them, you know, their life matters and their voice matters, and they can make a change in their life and in the lives of others. And I've seen tons of youth, you know, turn 18, go to college. I had a young adult who was in a program that I ran in the behavioral healthcare system for young adults, who was in our program, you know, struggled with mental health issues, said, you know what, I want to become you guys. And I was like, cool, that's awesome. And I have many youth say that. She went to college, graduated in 3 years, applied for the same job, and she got that same job. She is
That's
doing
incredible.
what we did for her.
Man,
so
that's awesome.
Paying it forward.
Paying it forward. And so it's showing that somebody who needed help in the same way went all the way back around and said, I want to help those people as well, because I lived it. I lived that experience, and I can help people. So
that's good, bro.
These youth are full of strengths and full of potential, and we really can't push them aside. We need to lift them up.
I think you make a great point, man. I think we assume that because somebody has mental health issues, that now takes over their identity,
right?
And it now has become all of who they are, and it like, for lack of a better word, disables them from doing anything. And that's not true at all. Yeah, like it completely just like neutralizes them, right? So now they're neutralized, and now they can't work a regular job, and now they can't have a family, and now they can't do this and they can't do that because they have behavioral health or mental health. And that's not at all the case. Like, you just proved it. You helping one of these kids, or you just walking with them, loving them, caring for them, right? And maybe that's a problem in of itself. And maybe you can speak into this. If you ever is there other situations where people try and help too much?
Yeah, for sure. I think sometimes they're trying to come up with the magical words to say to somebody, or just trying to come up with ways to help, when again, it is really about listening and not always about doing. You know, people who want to serve and people who want to help, you know, can be a little over the top in that sense, because we all have a big heart and we just want to see people succeed and not hurt. But at times, you really don't need to say anything sometimes.
Right.
And you just need to listen, and not there's no perfect thing to say to somebody who's struggling, but just being there is, to me, 99% of what you just need to do. And then when they ask for something, and they ask for help, be there. That's the other 1%. You don't need to be a magician, some magic social worker that can make everything come true. All you need to do is be there. And yeah, there's skills that we can learn. There's trainings to do. There's obviously professionals out there, therapists, psychiatrists. All those people are well trained to handle those situations, and they should be involved. But as a person who's maybe not trained, you don't need a lot of training to just be there for somebody. You can do that for anybody.
I've found that field of work really does that. It filters out the people who are in it for their own sense of, some prestige they might get out of it because they help these kind of people. I mean, you can't do that kind of work that long and go through some of the stuff those kind of people will put you through unless you really care about them. And I think that's why people like yourself, I can just listen to your story and tell, man, that you really have a heart for these kind of people. I mean, obviously for young people, but specifically the people who are kind of hard to love, that people have written off, I think, like you said earlier. That's really...
And it really does take just kind of a continual generation change. And I think Gen Z can take it to another level, because it is becoming a little more prominent in our society to talk about. Because I think about just throughout history, and we think about those who had mental illness, they were the outcasts throughout history. They were pushed aside. They weren't even, looked at. They were seen as broken and go away. I don't want to deal with that. When that's not how, that's not how I see the world, I guess through the lenses of the Bible, and really, caring for everybody. And everybody means everybody. And I think at times, even for people who do care, we still kind of stand off from the people who are a little weird and a little awkward. Nah, I'm good. I'll go help these other people. Because it's hard and it's difficult, and they bother you, and they frustrate you, and they get under your skin, and they're thinking one thing 1 minute, and then all of a sudden they're in this other place. And it's hard. It's not easy, but they need to be loved too.
Man, that's so good.
And a lot of times there's no one to love them, and those ones who are bothering you are the ones really that don't have anybody. And we need to take a step back and go, this person really needs me, because they keep reaching out to me. They keep bothering me. They keep sending me emails and texts and social media blasts and blah, blah, blah. And they keep going on and on. And it becomes so annoying. But if you really take a step back, you're going to see someone who's hurting and who needs you. And they just need to talk to somebody. And all you got to do is talk back. You don't have to fix them. They don't necessarily want fixing. They just want a friend, someone who loves them. And I think that's what a lot of us can do, is say, you know what, I kind of been dismissing that person in my life. Maybe I'm thinking of someone right now who bothers me, but I really need to love on them. And that could just be having a conversation with them to brighten their day, have lunch with them, go out for coffee, whatever that may be, and just show them some love.
Man, you're making me think of somebody right now. Came to mind. I'm like, dang, I need to hit him up. So
that's great.
Thanks for making me feel bad.
Yeah, no problem. That's what I like to do.
Yeah, bro. So, if you are a person who, so say parents, teachers, coaches, or let's focus on teachers and coaches, like people in society that perhaps are interacting with other people's kids, other people's teenagers, other people's youth, who perhaps are kind of noticing some of this stuff happening in that young person's life. Like, how can they help? How can they be there for them, maybe be there for their parents? What advice would you give somebody that might find themselves in that kind of predicament?
I think teachers and coaches, especially if you're connected to a school, you're in a unique situation. You probably see their kids more than the parents do sometimes. You're kind of there all day. And I can think of multiple times of teachers who really took that extra time to ask me if I was okay. And take that extra time to get to know me a little bit better. I think as a teacher or a coach, when you can take a student aside and just say, hey, how are you doing? And not talk about school, not talk about necessarily homework and tests and whatever, but just really, how are you doing? I see that, it appears that you're struggling a little bit, or I kind of just noticed a little difference in your attitude. I just want to know how you are today. I think that goes a long way as a teacher. You don't need training for that. Just
Right.
to really speak and be loving at school. Now there's obviously, if there's some issues going on, maybe they share something where things are going on at home, or they're struggling with, suicidal thoughts or depression or whatever that may be. They should definitely, there's professionals at the schools, counselors, school psychologists, things where they should go in that route and get help from professionals. But you can make a huge impact as a teacher or a coach just by building a relationship with your students and really picking out those youth who need help. Sometimes they're hard to find. I think we see times where kids do complete suicide and we had no idea. There was no signs, and those are just unfortunate, and those are really hard. And we see that in celebrities as well. I think times where people are like, man, that person was awesome. They were always happy and all this. We had no idea, but they had a secret life where they weren't. So it's not going to be perfect, but I think there are kids that we can dedicate time to, pull them aside, spend that extra time during school for some of those students that they may notice that, and you can make a huge impact. I just talked to an old professor of mine over a podcast who I vividly remember every single time he came up to me and said, "Hey, Kyle, can I pray for you today?" I remembered it because it was personal. He cared. He put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Hey, I just want to pray for you." And that was it. And he prayed for me, and I moved on. Now I know at school, maybe schools, you can't do that, or as a coach, you maybe can't do that in a public school setting, but you can still walk up to a student and say, "How are you doing? What's going on in your life?" It's not that hard. And I know teachers can get burnt out and they work really hard and they've got a lot to do, but they're there hopefully to make an impact in students' lives. And sometimes it's just as simple as, "Are you okay?"
I think fundamentally, you bring up a great point. I think we've kind of hinted at this or talked about it in a few of our other podcasts. This reality that there are certain jobs in society that if you take them, you have to fundamentally understand you're going to give your life to the group of people that you're serving. It's not just a career choice or a role that's an 8 to 5, right? You fundamentally understand that, like, this is going to require more of you than that. And I think you have to know that going in and be committed to it going in. And like, I think teachers is one of those, like, we're seeing our teachers do an amazing job right now and turn around and basically become online professors in a few weeks, you know what I'm saying? And then they're supposed to flip back and go back to what they were doing before. There's a lot of teachers that are doing it just because they love their students, you know what I'm saying? And so it's just amazing to see that. But also just like, I think we need to do a better job of recognizing that, like, like, you're playing a really pivotal, important role in our society. And you need to understand, like, this isn't just something that you should just do just to pick up a paycheck. Like, literally, our children are in your hands. You know what I'm saying? Coaches, like, you're making marks on our kids that are going to forever shape them and teach them values that are forever going to be impressed on the way they live their life. Like, there's so many things I believe about life and leadership and those different types of things that have been shaped through my experience in sports and the coaches that I had and the things that I learned from them. And so it's like, we got to take those things seriously, man. It's good.
Yeah, I think if you're listening, you're a teacher, you're a coach, you're kind of in one of those roles. I wish I could get in a room with all those teachers and all those coaches that did, that taught me life lessons and taught me cool stuff and really took the time to get to know me and thank them. Just know that there's tons of people out there who would love to thank you, who you have no idea that you may be impacted. And so be encouraged by it as a teacher and a coach, because you really do make an impact. Even the small things count. The small things are what people remember. They don't have to be grand gestures to remember those things. It's just caring for people. And teachers have a unique role to speak to students every single day in their classroom and really just get to know them and show them that people care. And it makes a huge impact on people's lives. I mean, to the point where you're making decisions as an adult that really came and stemmed from a teacher telling you something and teaching you something. So it's crucial that junior high and high school age of learning. And I remember so many teachers, names and that I remember that spoke into my life in some way, shape or form, and how beneficial that was.
That's good, bro.
Sometimes they're the only ones.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Real rap.
they are. Sometimes there's no one at home doing that.
That's
And
right.
you're the only one teaching them anything, and you can have a huge influence on someone's life. Um, and you just got to kind of recognize it. And it is hard in the day to day to step back in that mindset and go, okay,
Right.
Yep.
I don't know what these students are going through. I need to be aware of my own feelings and my own emotions and all that right now, not put those on the students, and really care for them in the moment and take care of me after work. That's hard
That's good.
as a human
It
to
is.
do in any place. But if we can
True.
do that on a regular basis, I think we can make a huge impact in the lives of people.
That's good. And so, man, really appreciate you being on. Let's just to wrap this thing up, because you do some really difficult work, right? That I'm sure you've seen some really great things and some really tragic things. And so, how has your faith impacted your work? So, like how are those two things coinciding as you do what you do?
Yeah, kind of like what I talked about from the beginning is seeing a youth pastor, put my needs, or in Christian terms, my salvation in Jesus Christ before anything else. Me knowing Jesus was priority to him. And so when I look into the world at people, I see the way Jesus responded to people in the Bible, and a lot of the stories in the Bible are Jesus speaking to people in need, whether those are physical ailments, hidden things, sin, whatever that may be. Jesus is always speaking to the broken, and at times I have to check myself, because it can be really easy to dismiss somebody who's difficult, dismiss somebody that's going through something because it's too hard. And I have to know that the power to help that person comes through Jesus. Because if it comes through me and my selfishness, I'm walking away. As a human, I'm not great on my own. I may sound passionate, but my passion comes from Jesus. And it's all derived from there. Because prior to that in high school, there was no Jesus happening. I was doing what I wanted, and I didn't care about the other people's needs. That all came through that relationship through Jesus Christ. It all came through that youth pastor that took the time. And so I want to take that same time and help as many youth as I can. And I don't get to share Christ all the time, depending on the environment that I'm in. If I'm in more of a professional environment, there are avenues that I take and resources that I have to point people to Christ and the church and things like that. And I continue to do that when they ask those questions. And so, but I think without that, I wouldn't have the heart that I have towards people, because at times, even in my relationship with Jesus Christ, I can get frustrated and really upset with people and not want to help them. But I got to, again, Jesus helped the broken, and I'm just as broken, and I need to recognize that. And then people need help as well who are broken. So it's just coming back to the truth in scripture, that Jesus reached out for those who are broken, and I need to do the same. And I have to keep to that truth all the time, because if not, I'll get lost and I will stop helping people, and I'll do things that are selfish. And living in that truth is important. And I think that's a way that we can connect to all generations that we work with is through that. If I can recognize that I'm broken, I can help a lot of broken people, because I can really get on that level with them. And I'm not, too prideful, and I'm not up here. I'm not above them. I don't see people who have mental illness below me. They're not below me. They're humans too. And God loves them the same amount that he loves me. And so there's no hierarchy there. I love them because Jesus loves me. And so I'm going to continue to treat them the way that they should be treated, which is with 100% respect and love. And that all comes from Jesus.
Man, that's good, bro.
That's awesome, dude.
Man, thank you, bro. I really appreciate your time today. Thanks for dropping that knowledge on us, bro. That's profound.
Yep, thanks for having me on, and continue the fight with Real Talk. And I'm excited to see all the things that you guys are doing. And I love being a part of this organization and working with you guys and just seeing everything being done and all the hard work that's being done, all the social media, the podcasts, the videos, the Monday night conversations, the work in the schools and high school and college. There's a lot of work being done. So I can say that if anyone's listening who's not supporting Real Talk, support Real Talk. They're making big splashes in people's lives and giving lots of resources to parents as well. So get on board, join in the conversation, because this is where we can really impact lives is through the lives of parents and youth and being influencers in our society and in our culture.
Man, that's
Man,
so
thanks,
good.
bro. Yeah, man. So episode 29 in the books.
Yep.
This is the beginning of the conversation, not the end.
Yep.
So you got questions, you got comments, hit us up. We want to hear them.
Mm-hmm.
You know where to find us: Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, RLTKPHX.
Yep.
It's been a joy. Carl, thank you. Love you guys who are listening. We will talk to you again soon. Peace.
Peace.